Intergenerational political warfare is inevitable in an aging society. Everybody knows this is the case. This is a myth. Now, Pete Peterson and the Peterson Foundation and Lester Thoreau at MIT and other people have been writing books, the same book over and over again, saying that class warfare in the United States is changing from rich versus poor to young versus old. And that Social Security is going to tear apart the fabric of America. Now, the only problem with this perspective is that there are no data to support it. Every survey shows that young and middle-aged people support old age entitlements, including Medicare and Social Security. In fact, the most recent surveys paradoxically show that middle-aged people have a higher percentage of support for Social Security than old people. Now, why is that? It's because they're not stupid. At least not all of them are stupid. 65% of them have figured it out. That's the percent that like Social Security. Because they realize that Social Security is a financial benefit for middle-aged people. And if Social Security wasn't there, middle-aged people would be writing checks, paying their parents' bills, or their parents would be in living with them. And they realize that they've been paying into Social Security a long time, and they're a future beneficiary. So this doesn't seem to them like a good time to get rid of this program. So it's very interesting. But before we move away from this slide, there's a complexity here. There's a kind of cloud on the horizon. Actually, there are many clouds on this horizon. I was told when I came here that the weather was beautiful, the sun shined every day. It's been raining every day since I got here. But anyway, there's a cloud on the horizon. And the cloud doesn't have to do with age. It has to do with race. 75% of the baby boomers are white. In 20 or 25 years, the majority of late young and early middle-aged people in America, many of whom will have low-paying jobs, will be minorities. We will have a minority majority. The question is not, will middle-aged people support old people? The question is, will middle-aged Latino population support an old white population? The fifth myth is that policymakers must choose between investments in youth or the elderly. Proponents of childhood programs write articles saying that the youth are the only generation worth investing in. It's very interesting to read the language. Expenditures in young people are investments. Expenditures in old people are expenditures. But in fact, the data indicate that while there are terrific things to be done early in life, very important critical periods of susceptibility, Head Start, early Head Start, et cetera, great ideas, there is also clear evidence to support the value of progressive interventions throughout life, particularly to reduce cardiovascular disease. And in fact, in the diabetes prevention program, which was a lifestyle, diet, and exercise intervention in people of different ages, the group that was most susceptible to the intervention were the elderly. It was most effective in older persons. There's also an intergenerational issue here. There are ways that we can, in fact, have two generations involved. And I'll give you two examples. One of the examples is research that was recently published by Linda Fried, who is the dean of the school that I'm a faculty member at, in something called the Experience Corps in Baltimore, where older, relatively disadvantaged individuals, African-American women, in fact, in Baltimore, volunteered in an inner-city school for K to 3-year-old students. 15 hours a week for a year. A lot of work. At the end of the year, the volunteers felt really good about what they did. The children did better in school and felt really good about what they did. But in addition, Dr. Fried and her colleagues did functional MRI imaging of the brains of the volunteers before and after this year of effort and compared it to control group and showed very significant improvements in the MRI scans of the brains of these older individuals who had volunteered. Now, there's always been this belief that there's no what we call plasticity in old age, that you can't, the horse is out of the barn, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, you know, et cetera, et cetera. You can't induce those kinds of beneficial changes, but you can. And this is not with a pharmaceutical agent or a scalpel, this is with volunteering. So this is good for 2 generations. The other really great example is in South Africa. After apartheid in South Africa, they developed a program to basically pay Social Security-like payments to older individuals who were black, who had worked their whole life, really got nothing for it. And they decided very smartly to give the payments to the women, not the men, in these families. And these were large, multi-generational families. And it turns out that not all the families were eligible, and some regions got the payments and others didn't, so they were able to see what the effects of these payments were. It turns out in the families that got the payments to the grandmothers, the granddaughters were taller and did better in school. Now that's because, number one, there was more food to eat, and number two, they didn't have to go work in the fields, they actually had time to go to school. So this is a transgenerational or an intergenerational effect. You help the grandmothers, they help the grandchildren. Those are the kinds of win-win scenarios that we need to come up with rather than this battle between one generation and another. Myth number 6 will also seem familiar. The principal problems of an aging society relate to Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid. That's obvious. These are the things we have to fix. Wrong. The principal problem of an aging society is that the core institutions of the society we live in, the workforce, education, retirement, the design of the communities that we live in, transportation, the structure of political parties, churches, whatever you want. The core institutions of our current society were designed to support a society with an age distribution that is very different from the age distribution we are going to have, and they are not going to be able to do the job. That we need to develop an infrastructure for an aging society. We need to re-engineer the core institutions of our society so we can support an equitable and productive population. If we take care of Social Security and Medicare, and we don't fix the rest of this, we are going to lose. And as I'll show you in a minute, that will not be pretty.